This is the Everyday AI Show, the everyday podcast where we simplify AI and bring its power to your fingertips. Listen daily for practical advice to boost your career, business, and everyday life.
When you create content on the internet, who should own it? Who should have access to it? We're going to talk about that and a lot more, and even just e-commerce and AI in general. But I'm extremely excited for today's episode. As a former journalist and as someone that's been producing content for 20 years, and now that talks about AI every day, I think about this a lot. You know, should we be protecting our content? Who owns it? Will just bots be creating content regurgitated 10 times over? I don't know. So my name's Jordan Wilson. Welcome to Everyday AI. This is a daily live stream podcast, and we have a free daily newsletter helping everyday people understand and use AI. So today's topic is a big one, just talking about different legal regulations when it comes to AI. We have a guest who is extremely qualified to talk about this. So we're excited about that. But before we get started, as a reminder, if you are joining us live, number one, thank you. Let me know, where are you joining us from? Where are you joining? I'd like to see this. Yesterday, I think we had people from 10 plus countries chime in. And I'm asking that because our guest is joining us from the West Coast, bright and early, 5:30 a.m. If you're on the podcast, don't worry. Check your show notes. A lot of great resources there, and you can click and come join this conversation. We're going to be talking about this in the comments on LinkedIn, but let's get started with some AI news. So first story, there is a battle brewing around NVIDIA chips and who gets access to them and who doesn't. We talked to this before on the show, but NVIDIA chips, their GPUs essentially power this generative AI movement. So a recent story is showing that now NVIDIA must obtain the approval from the US government before exporting its highest performing chips to certain buyers in the Middle East. The end goal purportedly is to stop these high-powered GPU chips that power generative AI from ending up in China. So kind of like a workaround. So looking at some of these countries in the Middle East. Next, ChatGPT competitor just launched in China. So we talked about this a couple of months ago when it was first announced, but the chatbot Ernie bot is now available globally, and it can understand both Chinese and English. So this is from two Chinese tech giants, Baidu and SenseTime, and they essentially just launched their ChatGPT style bot to the public today. And it can allow users to do everything from summarize documents, get medical advice, create videos, what you would normally expect or want out of an AI chatbot. And of course, ChatGPT being blocked in China, this is kind of big news because, we kind of just talk about, a handful of large language models for the most part, ChatGPT, Google Bard, Anthropic Cloud, Microsoft Bing Chat. But, we might be talking a little bit about Ernie bot now in the future. Last but not least, and a very relevant story for today, an AI copyright battle is getting messier. So we've covered this on the show a couple of times, but now the inventor of an AI generating image platform called Creativity Machine, he has lost a court case that essentially said he cannot copyright his images. But now Stephen Thaler is trying to prove that his bot is sentient and it can have its own independent thought. Therefore, it cannot be copywritten. Messy. It's messy. So speaking of legal messes, we have a great guest today. So as I bring him on, very excited to welcome to the show, Neil Peretz, the head of legal for WooCommerce, joining us from the West Coast. Neil, thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here. In the background, I'm rereading the recent Thaler decision.
Yeah, it's I could just talk about that for probably an hour plus and all these different things. But real quick, Neil, and if you're not sure, Neil serving as the head of legal for WooCommerce, parent company Automattic. So if you use WordPress, I think we said what, Neil, WordPress powers like almost half of the entire internet by now, right?
And WooCommerce actually powers 23+% of all the online stores.
Wow. So Neil has a great perspective, but real quick, Neil, just, I mean, because aside from your current role serving as head of legal for WooCommerce, you have a pretty extensive background in just building and growing AI companies. Talk a little bit about that and your experience.
Sure. And to be clear, it's not all generative AI, which is probably more so the topic today. And that gets people excited. I think the AI that I worked on at the other companies is probably far less publicly accessible.
Yeah.
One company was, it's called Alea Financial Technologies, and it was one of the first ones to use artificial intelligence, which we called machine learning, was sort of a subcategory of AI, to underwrite credit for consumers. And the goal was, hey, can we figure out a more precise method of determining who might actually be able to repay without blowing themselves up and without missing payments in the context of consumer credit. And if you could better assess this, you could offer credit to more people there, because there are a lot of people out there. Our hypothesis was that they're not well represented in terms of their reality by the data that might be going into the credit bureaus, which is then fed into FICO. And people always ask, what's your FICO score? We came up with an Alea score that proved to be much more accurate. And we were often able to find people who were not well valued by FICO, but based on our analysis, actually could and would repay various forms of credit, and they needed credit, and they were being turned down for it. And so we partnered with, among others, PNC Bank, and we put out billions of dollars in credit to people that, again, FICO would rate lower, and these people had great performance, actually. So our algorithms did work, but of course there was a lot of data sources put in and a lot of tuning of our models. So I had to go around and meet with all the banking regulators and try to explain to them why they shouldn't be afraid that we're involving basically AI in our credit underwriting process, because there are laws that try to protect against discrimination, for example, in providing credit. And they thought, well, AI, maybe there's all sorts of secret discrimination that goes on there. So right. On the public policy side, the interesting aspect of that role was trying to get others in the regulatory, basically, community, which could include regulatory folks working at the banks, comfortable with the application of AI, which already was proving that it was yielding a better performance.
Right. And you bring up some interesting points that, there is a big difference, I think, even between this kind of recent generative AI boom and kind of the more quote unquote traditional AI that a lot of us don't even know, but we've been probably benefiting from it for many decades, but so I know a lot of even our audience, Neil, is building generative AI products right now. Given your background, kind of what was your biggest surprise in building an AI company?
So the company I mentioned a moment ago, Alea, is a fintech company. I was not the co-founder of the company. I was a senior executive at the company, but I didn't start it, and I wasn't really driving as much of the product efforts. I was more so on the legal side, trying to figure out how do we make this all legally compliant. After Alea, I went and started a company called Contract Wrangler, and that I was the founder and the CEO of the company for quite some time as well. And there, the goal was, hey, can I use what we call AI generally, in what we call specifically machine learning, to read legal contracts and find all the key terms in those and alert people. Because what I noticed working in-house as a lawyer was a lot of times people negotiate very heavily on a contract, and both sides chime in. You could spend weeks, maybe months, fighting about various terms. And then when people are all done, what happens? The contract ends up like in a file cabinet or Dropbox or Box or the F drive, and that's it. They're on their merry way and they're off to the next thing. And the reality of what happens when you sign a contract is that's when the contract begins, not when it ends. Somehow they thought the signing of the contract was the end. We're all done. There's no work to be done, when it's the opposite of that. The contract is actually designed so people will take on certain responsibilities and people have certain rights. And if you don't know your rights or you forget about your responsibilities, you get in trouble. And a simple one that comes up for many of us as consumers is auto renewals. Hey, stuff renews when you didn't want it to. Maybe you wanted to change. you think about some of the consumer services you might subscribe to, cable TV, cell phone. If you just noted when something was going to end an auto renew and you called up the provider and said, hey, I noticed the term's coming up soon. I'm thinking about switching. Oh, we got a bargain for you, right? You'll get better prices.
Oh, that's the worst. It's the worst.
It's the simplest thing. So, but then the question is, okay, could I make a machine that goes and figures out some of these key terms and characteristics of the contracts and then notifies the right person and says, hey, you have, we'll call it an opportunity or a responsibility here, because they get essentially almost free money just by calling up and acknowledging that there's a renewal coming up maybe and asking for a price change or getting other bids. And there's lots of other things you want to go find in a contract. Interestingly, when you discuss contracts with non-lawyers, they'll say to you, yeah, I get it why contracts are important, but really only 3 or 4 sections are important. And this is a widely held sentiment. The part where they differ is they all disagree on which of the 3 or 4 sections, because everyone's got their own categories that they're very interested in. If you talk to the IT guys, they'll say, oh, all that matters is the uptime requirements.
Yeah.
If you talk to the finance people, they'll say, well, all that matters is, when I get paid, and do I have any significant liabilities where I'm going to indemnify someone else? Or maybe the lawyers would go ask about that. What kind of warranty is included or not included with this kind of thing? And the salespeople want to know, when is it going to renew? So I go call them up and sell them some more stuff. Finance might want to know which of our contracts allow us to raise the support price every year as prices go up, as we're seeing now in an inflationary environment. So the goal was build a machine that can go figure all this out. And auto renewals is a simpler one for us consumers to understand. We actually do get indemnification and other clauses shoved in our consumer contracts, but the reality is we have less bargaining power to do something about it.
Right. Yeah. So one thing I wanted to talk about, Neil, and I heard you say it there. So you said, talking a little bit about your background and contracts, but saying, if you don't know your rights and responsibilities, you're in trouble. And that got me thinking to where a lot of things are at currently. And this is a big topic, but I've got to pick your brain about it. So speaking of rights and responsibilities, it's been in the news a lot, just the ongoing legal battles over generative AI. So whether it's, the output from ChatGPT, it's images from companies like, Midjourney, Dolly, right? Just what's your hot take? Like, what's going to happen with all these legal battles? I know we can't, it's so much gray area and it's probably going to go on for a long time, but big picture, what's going to go on in this fight over, content created by these different AI systems?
Well, I think a lot of folks don't understand how they work. So that drives them to certain assumptions that probably aren't true. And those assumptions then drive their vision of who should pay who. They don't understand, at least with the generative AI models that are using transformers, they don't understand that essentially it's a probability game that they're playing as to, hey, if I type X many tokens or X many words, if I type X many words, it's going to suggest here's what the next word should be. And actually images is kind of a variation of that, where it's, what should the next pixel be, if you will, to achieve a certain goal. And that's a probabilistic guess that they have on their part. Obviously, the more they can understand of what preceded the blank spot that they're supposed to fill in, the better they'll do. If I said, eating, and you'd fill out, who knows what, cereal. If I gave you the phrase in advance, it was dinner time, so he was eating, well, then you wouldn't say cereal, right?
Oh, I would. Gosh, small tidbit. I eat cereal. I used to eat cereal probably about 2 to 3 times a week for dinner. So my chatbot would be telling the truth on that.
Exactly right. So this actually gets to user-generated content as well, right? Because if we trained on all your content, it would say cereal afterwards. But odds are low, actually, that if you searched at your neighbors' houses, that would be the main item on the table. So let's imagine you wrote a great book about your life, and it was every page of the book you described how you ate cereal for dinner. Great, that content's out there. Imagine that work is put out on the internet in some publicly available manner. A GPT type engine sucked it down, and it'll have one little data point that says one guy somewhere. For him, we fill in the word cereal when presented with the phrase that asked what people ate for dinner. But if you went and grabbed the blogs of all of your neighbors, you'd get a far lower incidence of cereal coming out there. So it's going to say statistically, what should I put out there? And statistics say, no, it's not cereal.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Statistically, I guess I'm weird in that regard. Hey, as a reminder, if you're joining live, we have Neil Peretz, the head of legal for WooCommerce. So Neil, like we talked about at the top of the show, the parent company Automattic owns a lot of different companies, but WordPress, Tumblr, so the parent company has so much ownership of just everything that's out there on the internet. And again, I invite people, if you have questions for Neil, please get them in now so we can throw them up. But how it just, to me, I mean, should is this something that you guys are talking about internally? Is this something that you wrestle with, just ownership of content, given that, Automattic and WooCommerce and WordPress own quote, so much of the end content, or I guess the users who are generating it own it. But is this just a conversation that you guys are tackling with internally? And where do you think this discussion will eventually land?
Yeah, it's a conversation we have a lot internally in the legal team. And then it's a conversation that we have a lot externally where there are content creators who speak with us. Our mission is to empower the content creators. So in the case of WordPress.com, people have content up there that they're targeting in various manners. It could be through a blog that actually maybe is co-branded by us because it's one of our lower cost plans, or it could be something that we're just behind the scenes. And so if those folks want reach, which they usually do, that's why you're publishing publicly like that, then our job is to help them get reach. And part of getting reach is actually being able to be consumed by machines of various sorts. If we step back, just think about search engines, right? Odds are high, if you wanted your content to be found, you would like to have your page indexed by a search engine. That leads it to be more likely to be found by others, seeking out information on people with, I don't know, green sock fetishes or something like that, if that's what your blog is about. So you would like to be indexed by a search engine. And so we have various setups where we try to facilitate people's content being consumable. And that includes being consumable by automated sources because people want that. And that historically has been how you, for example, end up being indexed on a search engine, the most likely way. We have had people query, is there a way to shut that off? And to some extent, we don't control that because these crawlers, or think of them as scrapers that go out and gather content, they don't necessarily knock on the door and ask and say, hey, WordPress, would you go invite me in? They're out there grabbing all sorts of publicly available content. Now, if they get the content through some type of machine-to-machine feed, well, it's a little bit easier. But really, they're set up to go consume content with what I don't know if you ever heard the phrase headless browser.
Yep.
But that's essentially what they use. They're using a headless browser. That by headless, it means that they're not actually looking at anything visually. They're just saying, give me the HTML code and I'll kind of decipher it myself. And it's a lot easier if you could just suck down code and you don't have to wait for it to render on your screen. So they'll go around and do that, suck down code. But to the person running the website, it's another browser showed up. You don't know what the end user sees or doesn't see. So if it's a headless browser, just something else showed up. Now there's clues, what types of browsers are out there, et cetera. And you can do other things to try to manipulate your site to foil the machines if you really wanted to.
Right.
But generally, if you're a publisher and your goal was to put out content, make it publicly available, that's our job, is to help you do that at WordPress.com. And then, similarly at Woo, we power more stores than anyone else on the internet. Not all of them are hosted by Automattic, by the way.
Yep.
because Woo is open source software as well. But we do run WooCommmerce.com, and there are many, many stores that we host. And people like folks to know that their store is out there and exists and can be found.
Yeah.
So they want to be an influencer.
Correct.
If you will. So generally, if people's job is to make themselves publicly available, we're there to facilitate that. Now, then they get this question of saying, what if people don't want to be found for some reason by machines? They're okay with being on the public internet, or if they're behind a paywall of a sort where there's exclusive access. We have options and we have tools to enable people to do that, ranging from the traditional, you can buy a certain tier of access on my website to actually even the Web3 options like token gating. If folks want to get all excited about Web3, we can say, fine, you can token gate your website, because we have the biggest partnership ecosystem of really anyone who puts out either stores for Woo or websites for WordPress, of other plugins you can get, some of which are many, which tens of thousands of which are available from third parties that work with us.
Right.
So every which way you want to slice and dice your website for access, it's available.
Yeah.
For WordPress and Woo.
Yeah, and
that would keep a scraper out potentially.
Right. But you do bring up a very important point, because you mentioned even just like WordPress, right? Like I've used WordPress for 10 to 15 years. I love it. But even WordPress right now, they have their I believe it's the Jetpack AI assistant, right? That helps you
exactly.
Generate AI kind of AI content. And this goes to Andy's question here. Like, who in the end, or is there even an answer to this right now? If you use generative AI, whether it's the WordPress Jetpack assistant or ChatGPT, who has rights to the output? Is there an answer?
Yeah, Andy's question is a good one. So part of what we started on the conversation of saying, if I already have content, what do we do about it being scraped? And what are some WordPress considerations on that? Andy's comment is then if I use, I think his question is, if I use AI to generate some content, who owns that? Which actually gets into the recent Thaler decision and other decisions about that, which is that generally the courts have found that if I want to own something, one way to own it is through copyright law. And copyright basically gives you the right to decide who gets to copy something. Yeah. Now, there are some exceptions to it for fair use, where things can be copied against your permission in certain circumstances. But generally, if you own the copyright on something, you can control how it's reproduced. So the recent Thaler decision was one in which someone had a machine, said, my machine came up with all this cool art by itself. And the court said, well, you can't file a copyright on that. And generally, our doctrine in the United States is that copyright is something created by a human. So if it was created only by a machine without very much human input to guide it, what you're going to find is you can't copyright it, and it's essentially kind of a public domain offering out there. If there was some substantial human input there, then you'd say, hey, it was kind of like, I used the computer as a tool. And there was another recent decision. I think this was it was a recent copyright decision about a series of comic books that had art in them. And there were some basic prompts that were given, and then the art popped out. And the court decided no, or I think it was maybe the Copyright Office decided, no, you can't get a copyright on those because there wasn't really much human effort to create it. Versus, let's say, Photoshop, right? Photoshop is using software as well, but there's a lot more guidance that the human provides. And stuff that comes out of your Photoshop, you could still go have a copyright on that. Now, another type of ownership right you could have is trademark. With a trademark, it doesn't really matter where it was generated. It matters what use you put it to. Sure. So trademark is protecting something else. So I could have something completely computer generated, no problem. If I file a trademark on it, I could own it in that setting, the class for which my trademark applies.
Are you still running in circles trying to figure out how to actually grow your business with AI? Maybe your company has been tinkering with large language models for a year or more, but can't really get traction to find ROI on Gen AI. Hey, this is Jordan Wilson, host of this very podcast. Companies like Adobe, Microsoft, and NVIDIA have partnered with us because they trust our expertise in educating the masses around generative AI to get ahead. And some of the most innovative companies in the country hire us to help with their AI strategy and to train hundreds of their employees on how to use Gen AI. So whether you're looking for ChatGPT training for thousands or just need help building your front-end AI strategy, you can partner with us too, just like some of the biggest companies in the world do. Go to youreverydayai.com/partner to get in contact with our team, or you can just click on the partner section of our website. We'll help you stop running in those AI circles and help get your team ahead and build a straight path to ROI on Gen AI.
Yeah. And it sounds like, there's more gray area than not, right? Because even as an example, if someone says, oh, I used, a ChatGPT or a generative AI tool to start this, but then I, as the human, continued, because in theory, there's really not an easy way to prove what, I talk about, these AI content detectors all the time that don't work. So, I mean, is this just going to always be something that always ends up in the legal system, since there is no definitive way to say, oh, yes, this came from a generative AI system versus this was human generated?
Probably if you want to have your content be impervious to challenges, you'd keep track of the fact of your human effort that you put into it somehow. And then you have someone accuses you of saying, the computer just did all that and you did nothing. Who knows, maybe we'll end up with humans out there whose job is to add value by moving around some words.
I think that's
out of the AI output.
I think that's SEO industry in general, right? Yeah, you go in there and you move around some words.
I add value, right? And so that'll get to the question from the court of, well, how much value did you add? How much value do you need to add to have it be a human work, or is it just the human part of it that is the copyrightable portion?
Yeah. And I'm gonna so we have a question here from Sarhash. I'm gonna tweak it a little. He's kind of more asking if we create content using multiple blogs and provide with genuine references to the content, can we end up in legal issues? And again, this show isn't legal advice, but I'm gonna tweak this a bit because I think it is an interesting question. When people are publishing content, Google has recently kind of released this synth ID that kind of watermarks images, but should publishing companies or even individuals, if they are using kind of copy verbatim from a generative AI, should they be saying so? I mean, what's kind of your thoughts on that?
Well, there's a few different questions built in there. So one is generally, if it's someone else's work and I reproduce part of it, regardless of whether it's AI generated or not, is that okay? And the answer is, well, of course, I'm a lawyer, so I'd have to say it depends. Haha.
Of course.
So it depends on the context at which you're reproducing it. But generally, there's this idea that you could go reproduce or manipulate copyrighted works of others for certain purposes, and that's considered the term is fair use, at least in U.S. jurisprudence. A famous case in this regard is involved Google Books, sued by the Authors Guild. And of course, if you go to Google Books, there's a lot of books in there. And the way they got all the books in there is they went and grabbed all the books and scanned them all in. And one would assuredly think, yes, the books are copyrighted. Yeah, they're published books that you pay money for. And in the end, the court said, well, it's okay, despite the fact that they're reproducing all these books, because A, you're only reproducing a snippet of the book. And B, you're actually adding new value, which is you've now rendered the whole book searchable and findable by those on the internet.
Sure.
And that's good. That's an added value. You've essentially provided a transformative use. It's your use of it isn't just, I can read the whole book, because you can't. Your use of it is now a content finding engine. And that really does add a lot of value for consumers of books. So in that context, they can copy entire books. But how they deployed it, it was a transformative use. It could be, other transformative uses could be, parody of a sort, right? It's hard to make a parody if you can't reproduce or at least a subset of what you're parodying. So we wouldn't have parody if you could say, nope, you can't mention me. How do you make a joke about something you can't mention? That'd be another example. So Smaller amounts of content you're talking about, sure, you could probably reproduce it. There's probably a fair use argument to be made. Of course, the specifics matter. You could either go check with a lawyer or at least just do some reading about fair use and what are the components of fair use, so you could think about that for your content. And so that was, generally the case with, using other people's content. I think, was there a subset of AI question about that though?
Yeah. Real quick here, just as we kind of wrap up, because we've been top to bottom here. We've talked your background. We've talked, some of the AI powered companies that you've built. We've talked about general copyright, but I'm going to do this, because everyone's always looking for free legal advice. I'm not going to, have you give free legal advice, but what is your stance if someone is wondering, should I be using generative AI to produce content on the internet? What is kind of some general guidance and best practices or recommendations that you might give to people so they can still be creative and put great content out for others to consume, but using generative AI tools, but to still kind of, not have to tiptoe that, could I get sued line? What's the best practice or recommendations? And
actually this dovetails with the second part of Saharsh's question, which was, he said, should I note something, that it was some of the content might be AI generated out there. Mm-hmm. And I'll say that is the preferred approach, at least for professional companies creating content. There are certain laws that are now starting to say, if it's AI generated, you should go say so, mm-hmm. and essentially give people a warning. And that actually, to some extent, could protect you because I don't know, you probably had it on prior episodes. AI isn't always correct.
Yeah, it lies.
It makes stuff up. Yeah, completely. I've experienced it myself as a lawyer. Mm-hmm. Right? Had it suggest things that don't exist, laws that don't exist, cases that don't exist.
Oh yeah,
So if you put in the warning that it's generated by AI, and especially if it's not been fact checked by you, that's mm-hmm. probably a good thing for you to go put on there.
Yeah.
So that gets the question of how do I use AI? So number one is, you might want to tell people when and where you used AI. Alternatively, you need a human workflow behind the scenes that verifies things. Mm-hmm. If there's any type of factual assertion, for example, you'd want to go verify it. Otherwise, people will assume you said it. Mm-hmm. And you'll be held responsible for the misstatements of something that the AI came up with. So that's part of it for using content. Otherwise, I think you could assume that you probably can't get a copyright if the AI generated a whole cloth. So if you want to get a copyright and you did part of the work, you'd want to go keep track of that and document it for yourself. And the challenge of this is, we talked about probabilities and what the machine comes up with. The machine can come up with the same result for many other people. If I have a magic machine that makes images, there's not a guarantee that it's not going to make the same image for everyone else. So I don't even necessarily have a lot of uniqueness when I rely solely on that. And some people really want that. They want something that is uniquely theirs to go protect. So you kind of integrate the AI with your other creative process, and then maybe you'll have something more unique, more ownable, would be the way to go.
Neil, you've helped walk us through everything from your background to how to safely create content. Tackled some questions. Can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy day and early day to join the show. So thank you again so much for joining us.
It's fun. Thanks, Jordan. There's a lot more to talk about in any one of those topics there.
Oh gosh, I know we could go hours, right? So, hey, if you're listening on the podcast, check the show notes. If you're joining live, make sure to check out our daily newsletter that we put out each day. Neil just dished a lot of information. We're going to recap it all in the newsletter. So make sure to go to youreverydayai.com. Sign up for that. Neil, thank you again for joining us. And we hope to see everyone back again for another episode of Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Jordan. Love the newsletter.
Thanks.
And that's a wrap for today's edition of Everyday AI. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps keep us going. For a little more AI magic, visit youreverydayai.com and sign up to our daily newsletter so you don't get left behind. Go break some barriers, and we'll see you next time.